my Buffalo Sabres. Huge win the other night over the New York Rangers. Love to see that. I was terrified going into that game, I'll be honest with you guys, because the Rangers have been so good to start the season. So yeah, I mean, looking at the Sabres, 500 record, 10-10-2, and 4-4-2 in our last 10. But consistency with a capital C has been the issue with this team. It's been one up, one down, and especially last weekend, that was clearly evident. Friday, 3 unanswered goals, I believe it was, to come back and beat the Pittsburgh Penguins at home in front of a good crowd. Great. Then just an absolute stinker on the road in New Jersey against the Devils, and Nico Hischier was certainly great in that game for a case. But just too many of those, like too many, just one up, one down, a good performance followed by just an absolute stinker. I get it, like back to backs. The second half of a back to back is tough, but also it's the NHL, and you have to have more consistency there. Sorry, Case, go ahead.
Yeah, just want to jump in and say something before you dive deeper here. To the consistency, this actually has me feeling like the voodoo has them making the playoffs, because I feel like the last 4 years, they're dominant in the November, December period.
10-game win streaks. And where is it this year?
Chad and I are just sitting, they're not going to make the playoffs. They're not going to make the playoffs. We keep saying that to you. Well, it's not this year, so maybe it means they're going to make the playoffs. Maybe they're going to be a late push team, or, I don't know. The voodoo says otherwise.
Well, get thumped by the Bruins in the first round, or sweep them.
Jeez.
Never know.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you guys mention that. Yeah, like it's every year. It seems like they have a really hot start. They're 6-1 in October or whatever, and then they lose 8 in a row in November. Like it's always November, just like the Ottawa Senators. November is a tough month. But they're just kind of staying right in the middle, and so I hope there's a big streak coming, that's for sure. But anyway, look, obviously looking at this team from top to bottom, Tage Thompson being out of the lineup, I mean, that really hurts the attack, and the same offensive firepower that we saw last season. Obviously, Tage was healthy the entire year, so him out is going to impact things. But, a guy like Dylan Cousins has had a slow start to the season, and Alex Tuck, who is going now, he had 2 goals in the game against the Rangers the other night. He's starting to go now, but it was a slow start for him. And they've got other guys out of the lineup right now, like Greenway and Gergensons. And so the depth takes a bit of a hit. I will say a guy like Casey Middlestat has really stepped up. And for a guy who we really weren't sure about for a while there, he was a high pick as well. Jeff Merrick told the story recently that in that draft, everyone thought they were going to take Martin Necas, who ended up going to Carolina. They called an audible, ended up taking Middlestat, and it didn't look good there for a while. Obviously, lots of coaches and managers in and out, but he's been great. In Tage's absence, and with Cousins kind of struggling a bit, he's been centering that top line with Skinner and Tuck, and they were great, especially in that win over the Rangers. JJ Peterka, 15 points in his last 15 games against the Rangers in particular, and he's been close to a point per game to start the season. Obviously, Zach Benson is sticking around, scores that gorgeous goal against the Capitals for his first. Goal. That was just ridiculous.
Crazy.
So great to see him stick around. I think he's given this group a bit of a shot in the arm, and it's like last year, the big weakness for us was defending, right? Like, and we outscored a lot of problems. That's not really happening so far this season, but we have been better defensively, I think, which is good. I think the additions of Connor Clifton and Eric Johnson have certainly helped. I thought in the win over the Rangers. I thought that was one of Owen Power's best games of the season. And obviously, you know what to expect from Dahlin every single night. So I think we're defending a little bit better. We're just not getting the goal support. And you certainly expect that to pick up, especially when Tage gets back into the lineup and gets healthy. And then, of course, the goaltending. And we saw the news today where Devon Levi was sent down to Rochester, which is 100% the right move. And, you know, I gotta give the Sabres credit. They tried it. Levi had a couple of ridiculous years in college at Northeastern. But guys, it is so rare to see a young goaltender come straight from college into the NHL right away and have success. Had that 5-2 record last season, .905 save percentage in a very small sample size. So you're thinking, okay, like this should be good, and you know he should be the guy. But man, it's hard, like to be a full-time starter in the National Hockey League, especially when you're a young kid trying to get the hang of it. He's definitely the future in net long term, I think, for sure. But I'm glad they finally sent him down to Rochester. .876 save percentage. He's got a record below 500 to start the season. Eric Comrie has been up and down. Obviously, he's been injured. But Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen has been terrific. And, you know, he had a couple of stinkers there after a really good start. And then he's picked it back up here. He had a hell of a game the other night in New York. I know I keep going back to that one, but he's been great. And so send Levi down. Just go with two guys. And I think that will really help things, because obviously going with that three-man goaltending carousel, it obviously doesn't work. You know, it's hard for guys to get into a rhythm and really even things out. So there's been a lot of criticism, obviously, of the team's play and consistency so far. I've seen so many comments about, like, you know, we need to make a coaching change and let go of Granato and all of that. I don't think so. I mean, these guys we're still in it. We're only a couple of points behind, you know, teams like Tampa and Detroit. And I will go back to what you said, Case. Like, it's encouraging in a way that, you know, we didn't have the great hot start out of the gate early, and then the big fall off happens. It's just kind of been middle of the road all the way through. So hopefully this team can get hot. We saw them certainly get hot late in the season and make a push, and we're just 1 point behind the Florida Panthers. But still have faith in this team to take a real step here, and they could certainly get into a wild card spot. So I think just health, you know, better goaltending management, get Levi to kind of get his game back in Rochester, be more consistent. I think the boys will be fine.
Yeah, something to touch on a little further is Tage Thompson. The absence of him is definitely hard on this team, and is going to be hard because he is like the definition of a play driving, like a line driving player. Every line he's played on so far this year has flourished. Greenway or Cousins, when he played with Tage Thompson, you know, that's when he started playing well. So it's going to hurt seeing him out. But with many of these injuries, I think you're starting to see the changing of the guard pop up, with Peterka excelling and them calling up Yuri Kulich and them calling up Isaac Rosen and guys like that. They're starting to get the young guys playing a little more, and I'm hoping that that's going to give them some good opportunities and end up in them, you know, playing more. Like, that's where I want to see this team go. Like, they've gone through a rebuild to have young guys to play. So I think the direction's good. I think if they can sort out the goaltending, then the good things are going to happen, and this team should be scoring more than they are currently, both analytically as well as just the eye test. Like, there's a lot of scoring players on this team, so I'm not overly concerned about Buffalo. The only thing I'm really concerned about is the division they're in. We've talked about that many times before, so it's going to be an absolute fight, and they're going to have to claw for every single point moving forward.
That's right.
Yeah, well, Harp, I wanted to touch on the goaltending. Being a goalie myself, that's my favorite topic. And, like Casey and I had a conversation during a podcast where we talked about Calder candidates, and one of the Calder candidates that, going into this season, people talked about was Devin Levi. And Casey and I both said, like, there's not a chance where he's a finalist or a Calder candidate, or even, for most people, a dark horse, because coming into the NHL as a young goalie is like impossible with no pro experience. Like, I don't know, it felt extremely rushed to me. I don't know why they insisted on having Levi in the NHL this early. It's not like he was a first round pick. He was a 7th rounder that they got as a throw in a trade for Sam Reinhart. And, I know we had the good World Juniors. I know we had a couple good years in college, but it just seemed like too much too soon for the kid. And even dating back to last year, and when they were carrying him as a third goalie along with Anderson, it just felt premature. It felt rushed. And, rushing a player can hinder their development. So I didn't like that decision to begin with. I'm happy that he's playing in the American League. I think he should stay there all season long. And maybe even next season. I don't think that's crazy to say. Dominate in a league again. Find your confidence. Get used to playing against men, because in college you really don't. It's a different animal, even playing in the American League. And then, of course, it's an even bigger animal and a beast playing in the NHL. So, it's baby steps. But
what do you want to say? It just reminded me of a comment I saw today, because remember he said in the press conference, you can't let the beast or leave the beast in the cage too long. Yeah. I saw a comment that was like, guess the beast is going back in the cage a little longer.
Yeah, the cage in Rochester. But yeah, so I don't know. I didn't agree with having him on the team to begin with. I think it's better for his development to dominate in the AHL. The second thing, I wanted to push back a bit, Harper. You said that the team is defending better this year, but the numbers really don't indicate that at all. In terms of expected goals against, they're 26th in the league right now, and actual goals against, they're 23rd. So their goaltending actually hasn't been that bad. UPL has been saving goals above expected, and Comrie is right about average, and same with Levi. So I don't know. Like, I don't actually think they've been defending better. I think they've been getting average goaltending and kind of allowing as many goals as chances they're giving up. So that was something I wanted to push back on. When it comes to forwards, though, on this team and the goal scoring, I do agree with you that it's bound to go up, especially when they eventually get Tage Thompson back. The goal scoring will go up. It's nice to see that Casey Middlestad has stepped up and has really become an elite player. I don't think they have a single guy right now above a point per game, but Middlestad leads them. I think he has 20 and 22 or something like that in terms of points. And so that's solid. That's exactly what you need of Middlestad. So kudos to him for stepping up in Tage's absence. And I think this team will start scoring more, but I just had to say that the defensive numbers don't look good.
To find the middle ground on Harper saying the team's defending better and the analytics chat is the games that I have watched of Buffalo, they have looked like they've defended better. It's the losses, they lose 5 to 7 goals. And that's what skews maybe the numbers a little bit. When they're winning or when the game is close, they're defending well. But there's a few stinkers in there. And early on, they lost, was it Pittsburgh that had 7 on them? And the Devils have had 7 on them. And there's a few that they've allowed 5. So it's statistically skewing it a little bit.
I buy that. I buy that.
They have looked better defensively. Last year was not a good defensive year, but they're scoring 1 million goals. So you can afford that at times.
Yeah. But you know what? They do have the personnel, and especially, when Power continues to develop, they're going to have a solid back end for years to come. I just had to mention that because, they might be defending well at times, but the analytics don't point to that conclusion.
No, fair enough. And it's, you guys will laugh at this. Obviously, big eye test guy when looking
Shocker.
when how a team is playing. But from what I've seen from the new additions in Johnson and Clifton, they've looked really good. Ryan Johnson as well. I know you guys aren't familiar with him, but he was a late first rounder in the Dahlin draft in 2018. That was the pick that was a part of the Ryan O'Reilly trade with St. Louis. So we got him in that deal as well, and he since being called up with some of the injuries to the blue line, he has not been sent back down to Rochester. He's looked very good for us. But just going back to the goaltending a little bit, again, I'm glad that Levi was sent down, and I know that Kevin Adams believes in him, but it just seemed like no matter how well UPL was playing or Comrie here and there, it just seemed like no matter what, we're gonna keep putting Levi in. We're gonna keep throwing him in. That's what it felt like. And again, he is a fascinating guy, like the way that he thinks, and he's very talented, and I think is could certainly be an elite goaltender and the guy for the future for us. But this was not managed well. I will say that. And but look, I mean, there is plenty of runway to make up for that. That's the good thing. And Rochester is a good team who could win the Calder Cup this year in the AHL, in my opinion. So he's going to get plenty of runway here to find his game again. I would be okay with the rest of the season, or at least until like the trade deadline, let's say, at this point. Give him enough runway to find his game, but you have to instill confidence in a guy like UPL. He's played well enough. He's put up the best numbers out of the three. You have to give one of these guys an opportunity to take this and run with it. And I think that's going to be big moving forward. So we'll see. But, again, with like your Devils case, I feel like our teams are similar in a lot of ways. Obviously, we're behind and a little bit and looking to take that step that you guys did last year. I just think that, if certain things fall into place and the consistency picks up a little bit more here and keep getting saves on a consistent basis, that things will play out the way that we expected them to in the offseason.
It's funny. It's our two teams are on the outside looking in, and there's a lot of optimism. And then Chad's team is higher up in the standings, and there was a lot of, maybe not a lot, but some pessimism in there.
Isn't that always how it is with Toronto? No matter how well they do,
they could be fifth in the league, and they're like, "They're not going to win in the playoffs."
But
I wanted to mention that about Marner, actually, because I feel like we dogged on him for like 20 minutes. The dude's still over a point per game. Like, sure, he's not as consistent, but like, man, he's still a damn good player. So, and I feel like that has to be said, or else people are going to like listen to what we say and tell us that we're idiots when he goes and scores 5 points in a game.
It's a good problem to have when your best players are struggling at a point per game.
Yeah, exactly.